it might change your perspective to understand other people's perspectives, other people's differences. So it's not that we're tolerating differences. We really are. We need to embrace them, not for the sake of embracing them, but because there's value in it.
From the City of Rancho Mirage Community Cultural Commission and Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory, this is Curiosity Trap, the show about the fascinating subjects, people, and institutions that spark a special interest in our audience. We explore things that you have always been curious about by going deep with experts and icons that represent our collective cultures and connect our diverse community. Get ready to get trapped in a world of discovery and insight available nowhere else. I'm Lauren Zuckerberg, and on today's show, we sit down with Mark Pine, the Deputy Director of the acclaimed Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. Mark was instrumental in the $93 million 5-year-long renovation after the turn of the century. And as a lifelong public servant, his passion is humbly supporting those who bring the universe to millions of people every year. Please join us for this fascinating discussion. So how have you been doing?
It's been a very strange year, as you can imagine. This is a public place. It's not supposed to be closed. It's not right to have no people in it. So, and as laments go, that's a fairly small lament relative to the seriousness of the rest of the crisis, but it's our part of it, and, we're hopeful. Cases are dropping, vaccinations are rising. Maybe sometime soon we can start welcoming people back. That's what we would really hope for. It's been hard on the public. It's been hard on our staff. It's just not normal or right for a public building to be empty. So, yeah. But times are changing, and I am encouraged about where we're going. So
that's excellent.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Have there been any opportunities because of the pandemic, like things have been closed, so you've been able to do renovations that might not have happened otherwise?
All sorts of physical things, inside and outside. We've also made a significant foray into virtual programming, which isn't really our forte. We're very much a personal, in-person experience. But like everybody, in-person experiences, well, if you're going to be closed for a year, that's not really an answer you can just keep giving. So you have to take your resources and your programming capabilities and see what you can do to make that be more online, more virtual. And We've done that. We're doing that. We're piloting that right now with our in-person school program. We're converting that to an online school program, which isn't actually just film the in-person program and then put it online. It doesn't actually work that way because some live performances transfer well, others don't, and the school program doesn't. It kind of had to be remade from bottom up. And so we've been doing that, sort of piloting one module after another with teachers to see how it's working, and then rolling it out with some test classes. And we're just going to keep doing that during the spring until we get to all 5 modules that would comprise the normal 2.5-hour school program visit. Wow. We're also doing we've also done live broadcasts of our monthly program, All Space Considered, which is our space and astronomy update program, very popular in person, very popular online. So that's worked out really great. We've been doing for several years online broadcasts of astronomical events.
Right.
We did the Great Conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn on December 20th. That was wonderful. And the live program plus the recording, I think almost 3 million people have seen.
Oh my gosh.
That's very, but it was a lovely evening in Southern California, and I wasn't actually physically here. I was in Ohio, and it was cloudy. And it was cloudy in a lot of the United States. And so a lot of my friends were very grateful because they could watch our broadcast. And you could see 2 astronomical objects, 2 planets, in the same telescopic view, which is unusual. and really kind of a special sort of thing. So we're going to do events this Saturday for the equinox. We're going
cool.
to do a live broadcast for the lunar eclipse in May.
Excellent. So going back a little bit,
Yeah.
so we can talk more about Griffith as we go on, but we know you come from the Midwest, you grew up in Ohio, so can you tell me a little bit about what that growing up experience was like and maybe what some of your big decisions were that led you to Griffith Observatory?
Well, we grew up moving around various cities in Ohio and Kentucky and Indiana because my father got transferred a lot and ended up going to high school in Toledo, or in a suburb of Toledo. I really enjoyed growing up in the Midwest, went to college in the Midwest at Miami University in southwestern Ohio, which is a public school, it's a state school. It's an old state school, 1809. So it's a beautiful campus. I met wonderful people there, had really a great college experience. Majored in political science and broadcasting. So neither of which would suggest that any of those pathways would lead to here. Then went to graduate school at the Kennedy School in Boston. And that was for public policy. And so you started to get the turn toward, possibly a government career. And my thesis was on electricity.
Oh.
But unfortunately, when I came out of graduate school, that wasn't really a high priority for the federal government, which is where I was looking for a job in Washington. That led me to my other first choice, which was NASA.
Awesome.
They were looking for people with analytical and analytical skills and science interest, and I had both of those things. And I loved NASA, and Challenger had exploded while I was in graduate school,
Oh, wow.
And that was a very, very difficult event, very personal. In a way, not that I was in any way personally involved with the space program, but it was personally involved with me. So I thought, maybe I can help, in your own little, very small way, because you're young and you think things like that. And so I went to work for NASA, started on the space station, then moved to space science, then moved to earth science over the course of 10 years there, and really enjoyed that. It's a fascinating agency. I loved working there because the people were so interesting, and I got mostly to deal with the scientists, first the space scientists, and then the earth scientists. And I was, regularly talking to one of the world's foremost experts on ozone depletion.
Wow.
At the exact moment in time that ozone depletion and the chemistry of the upper atmosphere that leads to it was getting figured out. And I found it interesting because I like science. I can appreciate it, and over time you start to absorb it. By the time I was leaving NASA, I was going out and doing public talks about climate change. Yeah, my friends have heard me say on more than one occasion that, and I'm not bitter in the traditional sense of the word, but I was giving a speech very much like an Inconvenient Truth speech before Al Gore was giving it, at least in that sort of form. However, to be fair, he was talking about those kinds of issues when I first got to Washington. Those 10 years at NASA, I loved working at NASA, but the environment in Washington really got kind of toxic between the Congress and the president, and they shut the government down, and it just seemed like, I'd rather not be a victim of whatever it is my employer, which is the government, is going to do, relative to the population of people who work for it. And if they don't care, I know my bosses cared. I know NASA actually cared. But the larger government didn't seem to have much interest in the workers. So I was fortunate to be able to compete for a job at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory here in Pasadena, La Cañada technically. And I was able to get that job as the director of outreach for the lab and worked there for 3 years, which was also wonderful because JPL is a place where all those things I talked about with NASA happen, except they happen even closer to the real. So there are clean rooms, and there are people who operate spacecraft by pushing buttons and turning knobs and hoping that, an 8-minute delay to Mars isn't going to lead to some horrible circumstance. I know, someone who I used to work with in Friends of the Observatory. She's one of the people who helps drive the rover. I mean, it's
cool.
really, JPL is it's such an engine of innovation and excitement and, filled with scientists and engineers and people who help them. And so it was great to work there. Then I took a left turn, and a friend from grad school called and said, "You have to come back to Ohio and help me with this .com." And I had no business experience, and didn't. And it was an online drugstore.
Oh, wow.
This is 2000.
Little different.
This is 2000, and so it was very different, and not really my interest, but the chance to be in Ohio again, the chance to work with a friend, the chance to be part of a creation activity, those were all really exciting things. Mm-hmm. And so I reluctantly left the lab and went back and did that. We had about 100 people. We were in an old bakery
Wow.
in German Village in Columbus, Ohio. And so it was very much like the .com experience. In one room there was a basketball net, and people would buy donuts, and it was real, and it was filled with young people. And I say that as someone who at the time was 37. I was the fourth oldest person out of 100.
Wow.
Whereas at JPL, when I got there at 34, I was pretty young. And most of the people there were older than me. And then you just sort of flip that script at this .com. And so even though I don't have business experience, I do know the world and how things work and how to write. And so I'm now one of the senior people at this .com because I'm old and experienced. But some of those young people were so talented. The designers, one of the designers who was designing the look and feel of our site was 18.
Oh my gosh.
Had no college, no training other than just natural skill and whatever training he had been able to get up to that point.
Wow.
So that lasted all of 10 months. Then we got bought out for cents on the dollar. Oh. And but it was like getting a master's degree in business.
Oh.
It really was.
In only 10 months, too.
Right. I was the public affairs officer, but the truth is I was involved in a lot of other things like marketing and merchandising, which I had known nothing about and which I found fascinating but absolutely not interested in doing. But
right.
The people who do them, they're amazing. And, it's just, it's sort of that validation in its own way in a business sense of the whole NASA model, which is you cannot send a spacecraft to another planet without all of these different kinds of skills and all of these different kinds of people. It isn't an enterprise just of some people. It's an enterprise of a whole bunch of people. And the .com was exactly the same kind of thing. Any business is kind of that way as well. So it was a fascinating experience that then opened the door to a moment of serendipity here at the observatory, which is that the observatory was about to start its renovation and expansion. It had gone 66 years at that point without any substantive renovation. And it was a 66-year-old building that got millions of visitors continuously, and general public audience too. So, and 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. So the building needed some love. A lot of love. It had kind of gotten loved to death, as our council member used to say. And so we were ramping up to move into that project, and the city was investing money, and the county was investing money, and Friends of the Observatory was raising money, and the Nimoys had contributed money. And that's about when I came on, and they needed someone to manage the new exhibit program. And so I started working for Friends of the Observatory as the manager of the development of the entire new exhibit program, which was going to be 6 exhibits. We were going to reimagine the entire program, keeping a couple of, critical, beloved exhibits like the Tesla coil.
Sure.
And the Earth globe and the Moon globe and our meteorite collection. But, really focusing, a lot of things had gotten built over the years, some in the 60s, some in the 70s, some in the 80s, all looking different, all in a different style, all with different sort of points of view, all related to astronomy. But the renovation offered a chance to actually make a cohesive exhibit program, one that was centered on a particular concept. And our concept turned out to be visitor as observer, and that the building then was the instrument. And we only have 20,000 square feet of exhibition space, as big as the building is. Mm-hmm. So you can't even tell the astronomy story comprehensively in any manner or form. So we focused then on observing. So each of the main galleries is a different aspect of human observation, whether it's observation you make with your eye, or how the sun, moon, and earth interact to produce things like seasons, or how pieces of the sky fall to earth, like meteorites or moon rocks, or people go out in space and bring back moon rocks from the moon, or in the gallery we're sitting in right now, the Gunther Depths of Space, it's about the universe and space of today, the broad universe that we now understand more fully, where, planets aren't just objects in the sky, they're places, and we've been to all of them. Albeit in some cases just flying by and waving, but they're not just dots in the sky. Even stars aren't just dots in the sky. Right. And galaxies we now understand more fully, and we're finding extrasolar planets, and that's what this gallery is about. It's about the modern universe that spacecraft and big telescopes have helped us discover, and that people can discover as well. So that's what we were developing the exhibit program for, and they needed someone to manage that because it was a almost $8 million undertaking, and and we were starting from drawings. And we had an exhibit firm, and I managed them, and we had lots of meetings. Our meetings would be 8 hours long. Before the renovation started, it was in the observatory's subterranean conference room, which was essentially a room that had gotten dug out of dirt underneath the building. And it was windowless, and it was in its own way perfectly fine, but kind of joyless. And we would be in there for 8 or 9 hours. And thank goodness we chose exhibit designers that we liked and who seemed to like us, and that we could have a conversation with, instead of just telling them, you do this. In this gallery, there's planet models that are lined up, and they're sized accurately to each other. So people can appreciate visually, okay, if the Earth is that big, then Jupiter is that big by comparison. And as it happens, the exhibit designers came up with the ultimate baseline for that comparison, which is the diameter of the theater that's adjacent to this gallery, and you can detect its curve, is the diameter of the sun. So they sized all the models to the size of the theater. So again, people can get a very visceral idea, a very profound idea, and that's what we want. I'm sure that the observatory has an educational function and that people are learning things, and that's great. But there's a lot of noise in the world today, and so what we wanted an exhibit program that was about inspiration. We wanted to inspire people. People who get inspired, who get excited, whether they're kids or adults, they'll stop looking at their phone. They'll stop worrying about the problems of the day, and just for a moment they'll say, wow, that's amazing, I want to know more, or I'm not going to forget that, or I'm inspired to do something, or if you just walked out of the building and looked up at the sky, then we've accomplished the purpose that we're here to accomplish. If you pedagogically decide, in my opinion, that your whole institution is going to be about educating, but you're not a formal education facility, then I think you're going to leave people a little dry. But that's an opinion, and but we designed much toward we're going to try and get people with their eye to get excited and to get inspired. But this was something where we were starting from nothing, and we were going to do something, and then it was going to be done, and then you could move on. And so that's what the exhibits were. That's what the entire renovation in some respects was. It was a project. And it was fascinating to work on a project because I'd never really done that. That was 6 years of my life where I was all in. Everything, every day was pretty much about the project. There were not always weekends. Work would extend into the nights. Obviously, they were 3 hours earlier in the morning, so work might start at 6. And so but it was, you knew it was leading to something really important, because then the doors opened to this place and people saw the exhibits and they loved them. And, as the manager, you don't get credit for that because you don't deserve credit for that. You helped it get there, but the credit goes to, gosh, the people who had the idea, or the people who did the design, or the people who built it. And the people who built it, Maltby, out of Philadelphia, or the Philadelphia area, they built exhibits that needed to sustain public use.
Yes.
Constant public use, a lot of public use, general public use. And that's hard. And here we are 15 years later, and our exhibits are still robust and sound, and we have to make repairs every once in a while. But I mean, fundamentally, they did a fabulous job building things. And that was one of the most gratifying things about that whole project, the whole renovation, is you hire these experts and they bring the expertise and you can see it. You look around and you can appreciate they were experts at this and they were experts at that. The other thing was to almost a one, and I supervised like 18 different contractors, big and then very little, like do one planet model. A specialized planet model. And to a one, every one of them was like, this is one of the best projects we've ever worked on.
Aww.
Because because they loved the observatory, they loved what they were building for it, they loved what the observatory meant. And it's nice to deal with people like that and to have their stories, be part of the larger story of this building.
Awesome.
How's that
Thank
for
you.
a long narrative?
That is great. I love it. So that said, do you have a favorite exhibit? Or maybe you did when you opened, but now has that changed at all?
A favorite exhibit? Wow.
Or space
That's
to
hard.
go?
That's hard to.
Top 3. No.
I think I can do a 3, but each for a different reason.
Cool.
The Einstein statue, which is probably the most photographed exhibit in the building.
Wow.
Is a statue of him doing this, sitting with his legs crossed, a very unusual position for the most famous scientist of our age, or the last century. And it's, he's doing that because his finger indicates the scale of the big picture, which is in this gallery, it's the largest astronomical image in the world. And he's bringing human scale to it, but he's also sitting on a bench so that people can stand around and among him. And even someone who's in a wheelchair can roll up next to him. And he was positioned specifically for that purpose, so that he would be, like everything else in the building, accessible to everyone, whatever their size, whatever their circumstance. And so that's why he is the most photographed, exhibit in the building. My love of him is not only related to that, but he was also the first exhibit that was done.
Oh, wow.
And so if you have 60 exhibits that you're tracking through a process over 6 years, and each one of them is a project in and of itself, the idea, and you're just going on and on and on, and it sort of sometimes seems like in year 4 or 5, nothing will ever be done. And then one day, the Einstein statue arrives, and it's done. And the bench that it's supposed to sit on isn't even done, but the statue is done. So it means 1 out of the 60 is now done. And I remember being so happy when we uncrated it and saw it. Not that we could do anything with it, but I just wanted to see it. I almost cried because it was just such a relief. Okay, I now see that the end of this, the completion of it, the realization of it is coming.
Right.
So he has a special place in my heart because of that. I would say the big picture is just partly because of its bigness, because of its audacity, that, it's the largest astronomical image in the world. And the great thing about it, too, is, that's not a claim, it's true. And moreover, it will probably always be true. No one will probably ever go to the trouble we went through to make a picture be that big, and that it's authentic. If you could have telescope eyes, that's what that little tiny finger of the universe would look like if you looked at it. And so I like the authenticity of it. I like the immensity of it. I like the visceralness of it, because you can walk right up to it, and the closer you get to it, the more things resolve. So where you see things that look like dirt, you realize when you get very close to them, they still look like dirt, like a little smudge, but that little smudge is a galaxy.
Right.
It's a real thing. There is no dirt on the wall. There's just stuff that was in the picture and that was seen by the telescopes. So I love the fact that the wall resolves itself at different distances, particularly if you're nearsighted like me. Then as you get closer to the wall, it really reveals itself. Or if you're on the mezzanine overlooking this gallery, you can actually look at a telescope. Look through a telescope at the wall as if you're making a scientific observation, because you are.
Right.
You're looking at space the way you would with a telescope inside a subterranean gallery. Then I love the camera obscura upstairs. And the camera obscura, if you're not familiar with it, is a very old instrument. It's actually a technology from, if you want to call it a technology, from the 15 and 1600s, where you use a series of mirrors and lenses to focus an image onto a surface. It's not unlike what a camera does, except the surface that it focuses onto is film. So in our case, it focuses a view from the outside down through an instrument on the roof. So the light comes in there, it gets bounced down, and it lands on a table in this little gallery upstairs. And it looks different than video. And the reason it looks different than video is because there's no film interpolating it for you. It's not a replay of the film. The table is the film, except it doesn't act like film. It's just a surface. So people are put off by the idea that it looks very real, because in fact it is very real. It's just a reflection of the world, and they could do it if they had some awkward positioning of mirrors themselves. And I just love being in that space with people who don't know what to expect and what it is, and the idea that they're inside the building and yet they can see outside. And again, is that astronomical? No, it's not. But it is an observation, and it is people observing, and they're using an observing tool, which, uses mirrors and lenses, and it does a job like a telescope does, but in a different way. And there's a simplicity to it too, though there's engineering, and then the thing that's on the roof that actually, it looks like Bender the robot from Futurama, and it's made out, so it has its own character as an instrument. And we really did try to fill the building with instruments, and it's one of the most, and the observatory had one before, but this one is just a little bit more, it's a little grander, it's quite a bit more involved, and I think it has a more profound personal effect, largely because people have no idea what to expect. With a telescope, you think you know what you're going to get.
Sure.
With the camera obscura, people don't really know. And the man who built it, George Keane, there aren't a lot of people building camera obscuras. They're rare. And he just did such a wonderful job, and he's such a nice, modest person. that he made this fabulous thing that's now just sort of woven into the fabric of the building. And then, of course, the Tesla coil, because how can you not love the Tesla coil? Again, completely non-astronomical, but, it's sort of woven into the historical fabric of the building, and something that if we had ever contemplated getting rid of it, I'm sure people would have picketed with torches and, other things. So people do love that.
That's great. So working here, you're part of the city of Los Angeles, so in the Parks Department. How has that presented challenges for your institution?
It's interesting to be a public facility. Mostly when we go to conferences, I don't necessarily know that people would want to be a public facility, but they love the openness that we have because we are a public facility. The fact that we're free,
Right.
because we're a public facility. So City of Los Angeles, Department of Recreation and Parks, the people of Los Angeles are paying for this institution to be here and to be open. That is what Colonel Griffith said they had to do in exchange for the building in his will, but, that was a long time ago, and the city could try and walk away from it, but it never has. The city has always stayed true to the mission of the place and has supported it and kept it going. When I started working here, you're very focused on the observatory because of what I'd been doing, and you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, the scope of this department is massive, and a number of people that they impact is massive. And our attendance is very large, but it does, the number of people who use Griffith Park is estimated to be 10 to 12 million people a year.
Oh my.
So, we're just a small part of that. And then there's hundreds of rec centers and pools and golf courses across the city. So so in that sense, it makes perfect sense for us to be part of the city of Los Angeles, and we're grateful to the taxpayers and to the city for the support that they provide and that assurance of continuity. We've never been stopped from something that we fundamentally needed to do, and when we really do run into those kinds of walls, we have the Griffith Observatory Foundation, which used to be Friends of the Observatory and recently changed their name to more fully align with the observatory. And they are our nonprofit partner, and they've been that since 1978. And I used to be an employee and a volunteer of theirs. And so I've seen their organization from both sides. And the lovely thing about the foundation has always been, even when I worked for them, was that the mission that they have is so very clear.
Yes.
Their mission is to support us in our mission. and that's nice, because sometimes nonprofit groups get a head of steam and start thinking, gosh, we could be doing so much more, that didn't have necessarily anything to do with the organization that they were supposed to be supporting. And the foundation has never been like that. The foundation has always been about, what do you need? How can we help? What can we do? The foundation bought our streaming switcher and some of our other streaming equipment and cameras so that we could do streaming of live events. Our staff does that work. Our staff uses that equipment, but the foundation buys it. Not because we couldn't necessarily buy it in some fashion through the city, but it's complicated because it's very specific kinds of equipment. It's unlikely to be on contract. You'd have to do a bidding process. And sometimes you know what you want what you want, and you need what you want. When we did the renovation project, for example, at the time, Friends of the Observatory, which has become the foundation, they bought the equipment for the planetarium, for the Samuel Ocean Planetarium.
Okay.
Because partly you do not want to use a public lowest bid process for a planetarium.
Right.
Because you will get a colander and a flashlight, and it won't be as satisfying as the Zeiss Mark IX Universarium star projector. So it was well that we had that support and that capability and that sort of different colored money to be
Yes.
able to buy those very specialized kinds of things. So we're very, very fortunate to have a partner like that. And they have made themselves a reliable partner for the city, so that the city appreciates, I see what you're doing, I like what you're doing, I appreciate that you support our observatory. We'll work with you on things like events that you need to do for fundraising, and we'll take account of special needs with regard to activities that you have for your members here at the building and make allowances for those in terms of parking, in terms of access. And that's what a partnership is. And
Right.
it's hard at times for cities to be partners because public entities want control. They want to control things, largely because they're worried about liability. But if you're really going to have a partnership, there has to be a give and there has to be a take. And there has to be an interactivity and there has to be a constant conversation. And the arrangement between the Griffith Observatory Foundation and the observatory / department / city is as close to a public-private partnership that I've seen that actually works. It's very gratifying as someone who's been in public service as long as I have. It's very hard, for example, at the federal level to have meaningful public-private partnerships.
Like you said, you've been here many decades now, not you personally, but the observatory, and you've gained the respect of the community. And I saw in a recent podcast that you said the people of LA kind of taken ownership of this place,
Yep.
and they look out for it.
Yep.
So you don't have as much problem with graffiti or something.
We should have, with our attendance as large as it is and with as much of the building exposed as it is, we should probably have more trouble. And I think people in LA really do feel an ownership of the place. It's not the observatory, it's their observatory. It's a public observatory. And that's what it was designed to be. And it is gratifying that that is what they believe that it is. And so they do get possessive. And possessiveness takes many forms, including, I want to be in there now. And I get that too, and I understand that. But it really does, they don't want things to hurt the observatory. Just like they don't want things to hurt City Hall as a building, or they don't want, a community that values that sense of community, and all of the institutions that make it up value those institutions. And to the extent that they can, they try to take care of them. And we are fortunate that as a building, as a place, as an institution, people seem to care about us. We're also poised above a neighborhood. An actual, you have to get into Griffith Park, you have to drive through a residential neighborhood, and then once you're in the park, you come up the hill to us, and we sit right over all of those houses in that neighborhood. And then there's a little community that's right below that of Los Feliz. And their symbol for the neighborhood council, the Los Feliz Neighborhood Council, is the observatory.
Oh, cool.
And they didn't, we didn't ask them to do that. They just did that because we're part of the neighborhood, and the neighbors care about us and they take care of us. And they are concerned when we do things that affect them, and rightly so. So we try to warn everybody, hey, there's a giant viewing event coming. So just beware that we're going to have large crowds and the roads are going to be congested, and we're going to put plans in place to keep traffic moving and close the park if we have to, so that you don't get, trapped in your homes. But it's happening, and most of them, the vast majority of them, are just excited about, oh wow, what are you observing? What's happening? And the one time where we had something like that, and it was super exciting, particularly as someone who used to work at NASA, was when the space shuttle Endeavour flew over.
Oh, cool.
On its way to LAX, on its way to the California Science Center. It was the only day in all the time that I've been here that I actually believed that there were too many people on the hilltop. And I was concerned. And we have worked very hard since then, because that was 9 years ago. We've worked very hard since then with LAPD, with the community, with our partners inside the department, the park rangers, park services, to make sure that we do not see and do not have a repeat of that kind of experience. And it always gets referenced. Well, you know, we don't want it to be like the shuttle. Which isn't fair to the shuttle, because the shuttle didn't do it. People were just so interested, and we were featured in all of the news coverage as a viewing location.
Oh, okay. So it was planned out that they would come through.
It was planned out that wherever they came through, you'd be able to see it best from here.
Okay.
And as it turns out, they flew by multiple times.
Oh, wow.
And they flew pretty close. If you were here, you're going to see it. So there were a lot of people. But other than that, you know, we've tried very hard to be a responsible neighbor, and our neighbors have rewarded that with their loyalty and their support. And in that sense, so has the entire city. So has the entire region. And people seem happy who come and visit. If people had a good experience, which we really, really hope and we work very hard to make sure they do, then that's great. If they didn't, then they get to say that, and hopefully we can be better the next time. We're a free public experience, but that doesn't mean we're not every single day trying to make sure that that public experience is of the highest quality, whether that's here in the galleries, out on the grounds, in the Samuel Ocean Planetarium, in the telescope dome at night when people are looking. Every one of those experiences, and the way that we do that is with people. That's why it's so unnatural not to have the staff be here, because the staff is the way that we do that. You know, whether it's a telescope demonstrator helping you to look at Mars, or it's an observatory lecturer and a theater tech presenting the show in the Samuel Ocean Planetarium, or it's a museum guide in a gallery like this talking about the big picture or the planets, or it's one of our administrative staff selling people tickets or helping them find their way through the building. It's, you know, those folks are the face of the building, and they interact with people. And that actually is the challenge, you know, to your earlier question about reopening. That is the challenge that we face in reopening. Is it isn't just that we have interactive exhibits in the building, or that telescopes are considered interactives.
Right.
It's that the entire building is interactive by nature. Because the third sort of interactivity is the interactivity of the staff. That is the thing that sort of separates us in some respects from other places, is that we don't have gallery security guards. We have gallery guides. And we have every person who's stationed around is positioned to answer a question, or do a little talk, or make a presentation, or help you find your way, or help you evacuate. God forbid the fire alarm goes off. And so it's an experience for people, provided by people.
And you mentioned it was free to come in.
Yes.
So, but when you get here, like you said, this is high quality museum grade exhibits here.
Yes.
So that's really a great thing for the city.
It is.
To be able to have that.
It was an investment. It's an investment. I think it's really important that people understand, in our case, there was a commitment made by the city. We're not going to tear the observatory down because it's old. We're going to renovate it. We're going to expand it because it's not big enough for the number of people who are trying to come. We're going to make everything be modern, new, and shiny and durable so that it will last another 75 or 80 years. And we're going to invest in, you know, technology with our partner, the Griffith Observatory Foundation. And we're going to do all of this, and then we're going to reopen it, and it's going to be free. You had to new electrical, new heating and air conditioning, new wiring, new phones, new exhibit. You had to do all these other things, and you had to build the addition, the one
Right.
we're sitting in right now.
Right, this was all caved out.
This was all caved out of the underneath of the front lawn, and and we looked at the architects looked at a whole variety of scenarios to make there be more space, but they were operating with a fundamental constraint, which was we didn't want to change the way the building looked from any direction, because the building can be seen from all four directions. And that's a challenge, and it basically drove them underground almost from the beginning. And so you basically removed 30,000 cubic yards of dirt in front of the building, between the building and the astronomer's monument, and you dig this big rectangle, and then you build it out into this series of galleries that we've got here, plus the cafe at the end of the universe, the Stellar Emporium bookstore, and the transit corridor. And then you put the lawn back, so that the lawn, so that now if you come, and film crews love this, which is if they stand off to the side and they film the building looking sort of from the slightly northwest, they miss the elevator.
Oh, okay.
And the elevator is the only thing that projects above the surface that makes the lawn and the rest of the building look like it's not 1935. So if they filmed with black and white film, only if you knew, oh, the periscope isn't over there, but the camera obscura is over there, only if you knew to look for that, or, and you'd have to really be an observatory-ophile to know that. You wouldn't be able to distinguish it from 1935, which means a filmmaker can come in here, and if they keep the elevator out of frame, then they can make the building be whatever time period they need it to be.
That's amazing.
And that's what we wanted. We wanted it to look, because people liked the way it looked. They didn't want it to change. They didn't need it to have a glass entrance or something like that. It looks like an observatory. It reads as an observatory. It's a piece of history. It's a beautiful piece of architecture. So we wanted to just preserve that. And all of that was part of that investment that the city made, and people in the city kept it on track. And so, I'm very, very great, as someone who was with Friends of the Observatory then and was coming as someone who loved the building and was an advocate, I'm tremendously grateful to the city for that commitment, because it's hard to make those kinds of commitments.
And it's really paid off.
I think people have appreciated the architects won a major award. The exhibit designers won a major award for their work.
Wow.
There was an engineering award that the building won. So there were validations like that, but more to the point, there were also articles there was one in the New York Times, there around the world, and then just anecdotal reports from people who come from other institutions and places that, you really seem to have gotten it right.
Yeah.
You can argue with a particular thing, you could even argue with a certain type of approach, but that fundamentally there was something here for people, and that it was meaningful and profound, and that it would, in fact, accomplish the objective, which is to inspire people and to get them interested. And, if they're interested, then if the phone goes away and they can focus, then they will look, and they will experience, and they will read, and then they will learn. You can't get people to learn or be educated until they're willing to engage. And so we took a very determined approach to how we would engage them. And that was a visual, distinctive, observational approach. That, there are some buttons to push, but they're meaningful buttons. And there are some video screens, but not many. We're not interactive by pressing. The scales are nice because they're interactive by standing. You can weigh yourself on every planet. People are very charmed by that. They generally don't want to get on the Earth scale because most of them think they know what that one is. They do like getting on Mercury and Pluto. And I on a tour always warn people about Jupiter. Because if you are sensitive about your weight, Jupiter is going to be a downer.
Right.
So, but that's nice. And the scales too are they're large enough for a stroller or a wheelchair. They're large enough for two people to stand on, but you had to step up onto them, and everybody can't do that. And we want the place to be a place that's for everybody. And so the architects came up with this idea, and we really loved it. There are 11 exhibits in the building that had to go through a building and safety review, which was a challenge unto itself, but then you're in earthquake country. So they actually had to go through a layer of review that is unfamiliar for most exhibit design and fabrication firms. And we did have to make, in some cases, some changes to them to successfully get through that review, because we obviously don't want exhibits falling.
Right.
So in an earthquake or anything like that, the big picture, astronomical image is 1 hour fire rated. And that has to do with what materials it's built with, what's on the backing of it, and so on and so forth. But that is the value of having experts. And even experts who are enforcing regulations, you listen to them, you do it right, so you only do it once. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to do all of this and then redo it. And we told the exhibit designers, and particularly our fabricator, Maltby, we need the exhibits to be long duration. We need them to be durable. You need to use materials, including bronze, so all of our railings are bronze, so that they evoke the historic building, but they also have the durability of the historic building. Because bronze doesn't wear out, it doesn't fracture, it doesn't fray, it doesn't do a lot of things that wood, plastic, or other kinds of surfaces do. And we don't have a lot of those kinds of surfaces in the building anyway. We traded off the extra cost of the durability and the hardening of these things in exchange for the long-term savings in operation costs. And, so far, 15 years in, that has worked as we'd hoped. So that's the kind of thing you want to do at the front, if you can, with the money, and then benefit from it over the years.
That's pretty great and important.
It is. I all credit on that to the city and to to Griffith Observatory Foundation for getting the money when we needed it to do and finish the job. And there were moments of great crisis, but at every one of those turns, somebody stepped forward. Whether it was public money or a private donor stepped forward. Mrs. Ocean stepped forward with the donation for the Samuel Ocean Planetarium, just as we were about to start building the exhibits.
Wow.
And that was, the timing for that couldn't have been more amazing and opportune and wonderful. And we are grateful to her and to Richard and Lois Gunther, who are the namesake of this gallery, obviously to Leonard and Susan Nimoy and their gallery, their theater, and Mrs. Gottlieb and the Gottlieb Transit Corridor. We had some really fabulous individual donors, a small number of very dedicated corporate sponsors, a lot of foundation support. All of the big name foundations of Los Angeles, they helped us, and we're grateful to them. Amundsen, Weingart, Whittier, Keck, and their names are around the building because that was it was a big deal, and they were there for us. So we're grateful to them. And I think the observatory wove its magic on all of those people. Just like it did on our exhibit contractors. They like the idea of the place. And the thing that you learn about the observatory as you go on in time is that everybody loves something different about it. And they don't all love the astronomy necessarily, or the space, or whatever. Some people really just love the building because it's a beautiful example of historic architecture. They love its purpose, or they love where it sits, or they love the vistas that they can see from here. And you know what? It doesn't matter. It does, that's
Right.
the advantage. That really, to your earlier question, that is the advantage of being free. We don't
Yes.
need to care nor prescribe why people would want to come here, or how long that they have to stay, or that they need to feel some obligation because they've made some sort of payment to stay longer or shorter. It is a luxury in the sense of other institutions that really have to charge. And so it isn't that we're better. We got lucky on that one because we're a public institution and we have the support of the city, and that was what Griffith mandated. We're fortunate in that regard, and our colleagues in the private museums, they like their flexibility, but sometimes I think they would love to see the kind of audience they might get if they were free.
Right.
You see everyone here, all parts of Los Angeles, all different neighborhoods, all different types of people, races, creeds, colors, religions, and they get along. This is a gathering place, and nobody is particularly interested in whatever otherness they might have some concern about with others. They're just here to be happy. Everyone comes here because everyone can come here. And
Right.
it's nice. So when I leave at night and I walk out and I look on the lawn and people are doing any old thing you can imagine, they've got their dogs, they're having a picnic, they're sitting around, they're watching the sunset, but almost universally they seem to be having a good time and being happy and not bothering each other or being concerned about each other or whatever it is that they would be concerned about if they were down the hill somewhere else or in the midst of their daily lives. And there's something really nice about that. You walk down the hill, and whatever kind of day it's been, because there are challenging days here because you're operating a public venue, but it certainly does remind you of the perspective of the place. And if you're going to drive home, that's exactly the kind of perspective you'd like to have.
Yes.
Because I'm a mission person. So that's why I worked for the places that I worked, is because I believed in their mission. And I believe in the mission of the observatory and the park and the department and the city to make people's lives better. And I think this is a place, and a lot of those kinds of programs in the department are programs that do that thing. So.
That is very fortunate for Griffith Observatory.
Well,
And
thank you.
You've thanked all the people that have helped you, the foundation, and that's wonderful, and to have all these great experts. But you're a big part of that legacy too. You had to manage all that to keep it going, so.
There is a fundamental humility that if you don't already have it, it will be thrust upon you. Because there is nothing about a project like that that is singular, or
True.
that there is any room for me, credit. Mm-hmm. There's none of that. As a matter of fact, really what there is you need to get done, you need everyone else to get credit. You need everyone else to be
Right.
motivated. You need everyone else to be on task, moving forward, and happy about it. There is, of course, also, though people lament aging, there is the advantage that as you get a little bit older, you realize, gosh, I don't feel the need for credit the way I did when I was younger. Mm-hmm. There is not that driving progression toward the next thing or the higher level or the more or the whatever, or even just the ego of, I have to be responsible and seen as responsible for that.
Sure.
So it's just, and that in some respects, that aspect and that impact of the project was very freeing, because if you let that go, then you find you can be a much better manager, because you really don't, people say, well, you make me look good. Well, the fact is, I don't want employees to do something to make me look good. What point is there of that? They need to do things to make the institution look good, and I'm supposed to help them. And they can get all the credit, and I don't need it. It's not going to do anything for me, and I'm satisfied that the work gets done. And that's not because I'm some great noble person. It's just your values shift over time, and mine, have shifted as well. And I'm a different person than I was. And the project was a substantive part of that, even just in terms of the things that I attend to in the world. We have a whole range of people who work on our staff, and they come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and they have all sorts of different objectives and goals in their lives, and they even have very different ways that they do their work here. And that's great. That's great for the institution. It's great for society. It's great for them that they have a place that they can be like that. The city is a very welcoming employer, more so than any I've ever worked for. And I think that is a choice that the city has made to be a welcoming employer. So you see a city workforce that looks more like the community.
And that's huge.
And it is huge. It is huge. And not just because, people are now aware of social justice. What's huge about it is you get to that point because you made that decision 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and you put in place policies that made your workforce be okay, made it okay to be part of that workforce. The city is really right out there. And I give them a lot of credit for that. And that's not something that they generally get credited for, because I think people at this point inside just kind of take it for granted that they work with all sorts of different people. If you're a science institution, there are no miracles. There are just things that are well planned. There's good fortune, but even that comes from sometimes well planning.
Right.
And there's intent. And so I appreciate that intent, that they've exercised, and the result, which is nice, because, people say celebrate differences, but the fact is that you celebrate them because they have meaning, and they have meaning for you. You're not necessarily going to be like that, but it broadens your perspective on the world. There's value in those people. There's value in all people. I do think that we're in an interesting moment where it seems like the arrow is moving toward that. And I find that encouraging.
It's so important to get your thoughts out into the community and see that public institutions can work. So how do you think this could translate to Rancho Mirage with our observatory there?
I think what Rancho Mirage has done in terms of its investment, both in its library and now in the observatory, is exactly one of those kinds of things where there is clear intent, and then there is follow through, and there is an investment. It's an investment in a larger vision of a community that you need to have if you're going to make transformative change. It isn't just for Rancho Mirage. It's funded by Rancho Mirage. It was supported by Rancho Mirage, but it is for the entire valley. It's a cultural resource for everyone in the valley. And so then, some years ago, a group of people from Rancho Mirage, and I say a group of people, but they really were leaders. There were council members, there was a city manager, there was a project manager, there were people from the library, there was this whole delegation, and they came here. And they said, and they wanted to spend some time here and understand what we did publicly and so on and so forth. And how could that work in Rancho Mirage? And so I was delighted. I got to show the group around, and they got to see the public telescopes and the Samuel Ocean Planetarium, the exhibits, the way people interacted with the place. And when they were going to leave, they said, we're going to build a public observatory. And I thought to myself, well, that is an unusual undertaking because there aren't very many in the world or in the United States.
Right.
Well, then it's a couple years later, and lo and behold, there's an observatory right next to the library. And it's this fabulous new design, and it's got all the modern conveniences, and yet has the same sort of I'm going to do it myself kind of feel, where the person can look through the telescope and have that fundamental observing experience, which Colonel Griffith so wanted, we so value. Now you value it as well. Now we have a sister institution in the Valley. Nothing could be more fabulous than that. So and I think the people of Rancho Mirage should be commended, as should the leaders that they've chosen, who had the vision, followed through on the vision, went to the trouble, and did it. Because those are hard things. And it's also hard to do something like that where you're investing in something that's going to be beyond you. And that's where you have to have the support of your taxpayers to say, this is the vision. We see our vision in investment as being one that is expansive and that it is inclusive. And that is, again, a choice. And I think it is to their credit that they made that choice, both first for the library and then for the observatory. So it's a natural partnership for us to be interacting with the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory, because you're like us.
We appreciate everything you've shared with us and shown us around and all those things.
It was a pleasure to do it. It was a pleasure to come out and speak at the library last year. It was the last normal thing that I did before the pandemic started. So
Yeah.
I was so grateful for that opportunity. And it's great to have you here at Griffith Observatory today, because, it's just nice to have you all back here again. And congratulations on what you all have done there. And I look
Thank
forward
you.
to visiting again.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very fortunate there.
Yep.
And appreciative. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.